The emergency beacon screamed through the silent corridors of Medical Station Epsilon 7, jolting Dr. Vexthari from his routine equipment checks. His 4 crystalline arms moved quickly across the control panels as his sensory stalks picked up the distress signal. The transmission crackled with static, but the words came through clearly enough. This is human vessel Phoenix requesting emergency medical assistance. We have casualties aboard. Captain's hurt pretty bad, but he keeps insisting it's just a scratch. We're coming in fast. Vexthari's exoskeleton shifted nervously. In his 40 years of medical practice across the galaxy, treating 17 different alien species, he had never worked on a human before. The bipedal creatures from the notorious death world called Earth were still newcomers to the Galactic Medical Council. Their reputation preceded them though, stories of impossible endurance and reckless bravery that most civilized species dismissed as wild tales. Nurse Killandra, prepare the emergency bay, Vexthari called out, his voice translating through the station's universal language system. We have incoming human casualties. The blue-skinned Zenthri nurse looked up from her data pad, her large silver eyes widening. Humans? Are the stories true about their homeworld being covered in venomous creatures and deadly weather? We shall find out soon enough, Vexthari replied, checking his medical scanners one more time. Alert Dr. NYM Tara and have the trauma team standing by. 20 minutes later, the damaged human vessel docked with their station. Vexthari could see the scorch marks and twisted metal along its hull through the observation window. Whatever had happened out there had been violent. The airlock cycled open with a hiss of equalizing pressure. 3 humans in torn uniforms rushed through carrying a 4th on an emergency stretcher. Vexthari got his first look at the species he would be treating and felt his crystalline structure vibrate with shock. The unconscious human male on the stretcher was massive by galactic standards, nearly 2 meters tall with dense muscle structure that seemed designed for a high-gravity world. But it was his injuries that made Vexthari's medical training scream warnings. A jagged piece of hull plating had torn through the human's torso, creating a gaping wound that exposed broken ribs and internal organs. Blood had soaked through the makeshift bandages, and by Vexthari's quick assessment, the creature had lost enough bodily fluids to kill 3 Altarians. By the 7 sacred crystals, whispered Nurse Killandra, her blue skin turning pale white. He cannot possibly be alive. The human carrying the front of the stretcher, a female with short brown hair and lieutenant's insignia, looked up at them with concerned but steady eyes. He lost consciousness about 10 minutes ago, but his vital signs are still strong. Tom here had to practically sit on him to keep him from walking around the ship. Walking. Vexthari's voice rose to a high whistle of disbelief. His medical scanners were already working, taking readings that defied everything he knew about biology. With injuries of this magnitude. The male human at the back of the stretcher, apparently Tom, nodded grimly. Captain Mitchell kept saying it was nothing serious. He wanted to help with engine repairs before we made it here. Stubborn as always. They transferred the unconscious human to the medical bay's primary treatment table. Vexthari began connecting monitoring equipment while his mind raced through treatment protocols. According to every medical text he had studied, the patient should have died within minutes of receiving such trauma. The cardiovascular system alone should have failed completely. But the monitors showed something impossible. Heart rate elevated but steady. Blood pressure low but maintaining circulation. Brain activity normal. The human's body was somehow functioning despite massive structural damage that would instantly kill any known species. I do not understand these readings, Vexthari muttered, running his scanners over the wound again. The damage is catastrophic, yet all major systems remain operational. Then the truly impossible happened. The human's eyes snapped open. Not the slow, confused awakening of someone emerging from unconsciousness, but the immediate alertness of a predator assessing its surroundings. Bright brown eyes focused on Vexthari's crystalline face, and the human attempted to sit up despite the gaping hole in his torso. Whoa there, Captain, Tom said quickly, placing a restraining hand on his superior's shoulder. You need to stay still. Captain Mitchell looked down at his wound with mild interest, as if examining a torn piece of clothing rather than life-threatening trauma. Hey there, Doc, he said to Vexthari, his voice steady and clear. You wouldn't happen to have something for a headache, would you? This scratch is really starting to throb. Vexthari's 4 eyes stared in absolute shock. Scratch? His translator must be malfunctioning. He ran a quick diagnostic, but the device was working perfectly. The human had actually called injuries that would hospitalize most species for months a simple scratch. Sir, Vexthari said carefully, his sensory stalks recoiling instinctively, you have suffered severe trauma. Please remain motionless while I assess the full extent of your injuries. Captain Mitchell glanced at his crew members with what appeared to be mild embarrassment. Sorry about this, folks. Guess I wasn't paying attention when that panel came loose. Should have ducked faster. The female lieutenant, her name tag read Williams, shook her head with fond exasperation. James, you took a piece of bulkhead to the chest that weighs more than most people. Stop apologizing. In 40 years of practicing medicine across the galaxy, Dr. Vexthari had never encountered anything like this. His entire understanding of biological limits had just been shattered by a species that casually dismissed mortal wounds as minor inconveniences. He began to understand why the rest of the galaxy viewed humans with a mixture of awe and terror. Dr. Vexthari ran his bioscanner across Captain Mitchell's exposed torso for the 7th time in 2 hours. Each reading produced the same impossible results that made his crystalline brain hurt trying to process them. The device had to be broken, but 3 different scanners all showed identical data. Cardiovascular efficiency at 62% despite massive structural damage, he muttered into his recording device, his 4 arms working frantically across multiple displays. Respiratory function maintaining adequate oxygen distribution with compromised lung cavity. Pain response indicators, practically non-existent. Captain Mitchell lay on the medical table, chatting casually with his crew as if he were relaxing in a park rather than fighting for his life. The gaping wound across his chest rose and fell with each breath, internal organs clearly visible through torn muscle and broken ribs. Any other species would have been screaming in agony or dead from shock. So Tom, did you manage to fix that cooling problem in engine room 3? Mitchell asked conversationally. Tom Harrison, the ship's chief engineer, leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. Got it sorted just before the accident. Though I think we might need new parts when we reach the next station. Good man. Sarah, what's our timeline looking like? Lieutenant Williams consulted her data pad. Command expects us back in 2 weeks, but I already sent word about the delay. They understand. Vexthari stopped his scanning and stared at the humans with all 4 of his eyes. Excuse me, but how are you having normal conversation? Your captain has injuries that should have rendered him unconscious from pain alone. The 3 humans exchanged glances that Vexthari was beginning to recognize as their species' way of silently communicating. It was Tom who finally answered. Well, Doc, this really isn't that bad by our standards. Remember that time on Rigel Station when that support beam fell on you, Captain? Mitchell's face brightened with the memory. Oh right. That thing went straight through my left leg. Now that actually stung a bit. Had to finish my shift hopping around on 1 foot. Vexthari's sensory stalks nearly twisted themselves into knots. A support beam went through your leg and you continued working. Had to, Mitchell said matter-of-factly. Station reactor was acting up, and I was the only one qualified to fix it. Couldn't very well leave thousands of people without power over a little puncture wound. Little puncture wound. Nurse Killandra had been listening from across the medical bay, and her voice rose to a squeak of disbelief. Sarah Williams laughed, a sound that Vexthari found surprisingly pleasant despite his growing confusion. You should see the scar. It's actually pretty impressive. The doctor turned back to his medical readings, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The human's white blood cell count was astronomical, levels that should indicate massive infection or immune system failure. Instead, the cells seemed to be actively working to repair damage at a rate he had never witnessed in any species. Your immune system, he said slowly, it appears to be functioning at approximately 10 times normal efficiency. Is that good or bad? Mitchell asked. It should be impossible. No biological system can sustain this level of activity without causing organ failure. Tom pushed himself off the wall and walked over to examine the medical displays. As he moved, Vexthari noticed the engineer was favoring his right leg significantly. Interesting readings. Hey Doc, mind if I ask what you consider a serious injury? The question caught Vexthari off guard. Well, any trauma that compromises major organ function, causes significant blood loss, or results in structural damage to vital systems would be classified as serious. Why do you ask? The 3 humans looked at each other again with those silent communications passing between them. Sarah spoke up first. It's just that our definitions might be a bit different. Back home on Earth, we don't usually worry unless something important falls off and doesn't grow back. Grow back? Vexthari's voice climbed several octaves. Figure of speech, Tom said quickly. Though humans do heal pretty fast compared to most species we've met. As if to prove his point, Vexthari watched his scanners detect new cellular growth along the edges of Mitchell's wound. Tissue that should take weeks to regenerate was visibly beginning to knit together after only a few hours. "This is unprecedented," the doctor whispered, recording everything. "Your metabolic rate is running at levels that should cause immediate system shutdown, yet all your organs are functioning normally." Mitchell tried to sit up to get a better look at the scanner readings, causing Nurse Calandra to rush over in panic. "Captain, please. You must remain still." "Relax, I feel fine," Mitchell said, though he did lie back down when he saw her distress. "Actually, I'm feeling much better. Whatever you gave me for the headache worked great." Vexthari checked his drug administration log. He had given the human a mild pain reliever, something equivalent to what other species used for minor aches. For injuries of this magnitude, he should have administered their strongest surgical anesthetics. "Captain Mitchell," he said carefully, "on a scale where 1 represents no pain and 10 represents unbearable agony, how would you rate your current discomfort?" Mitchell considered this thoughtfully. "Maybe a 2? 3 at most. It's more annoying than painful, really. Like when you sleep wrong and get a crick in your neck." Dr. Vexthari made a note in his medical log that would later become legendary in galactic medical circles. Human pain tolerance exceeds all known parameters. Patient rates potentially fatal trauma as minor inconvenience. Recommend complete revision of pain management protocols for this species. He was beginning to understand why the rest of the galaxy treated humans with such cautious respect. Dr. Vexthari accessed the galactic database while monitoring his impossible patient. He needed to understand what kind of world could produce a species this resilient. As the information about Earth loaded onto his screens, his crystalline structure began to vibrate with growing horror. "Atmospheric pressure 14.7 times galactic standard," he read aloud, his voice rising with each new detail. "Gravity 3.2 times council norm. Background radiation levels that would require protective suits on most civilized worlds." Lieutenant Williams, who had been quietly reading reports in the corner of the medical bay, looked up from her datapad. "Oh, you're reading about home. Those are just the basic measurements though. You should see Earth during storm season." Vexthari's 4 eyes focused on her with intense curiosity. "Storm season? Well, we get hurricanes that can level entire cities, tornadoes that throw vehicles around like toys, and lightning storms that can last for days. Then there's blizzard season, flood season, earthquake season." Sarah counted off on her fingers as if listing pleasant vacation activities. "Earthquake season?" Nurse Calandra had approached to listen, her blue skin growing paler with each revelation. Captain Mitchell, now sitting upright despite his gaping chest wound, joined the conversation with obvious fondness. "Sarah here grew up in Australia. That continent tries to kill everything that lives on it, but somehow people keep thriving there." Sarah laughed warmly. "It's not that dangerous. We only lost about 20% of the original colonists to the wildlife in the first few years. After that, people adapted pretty quickly." Vexthari's medical scanner slipped from his crystalline grip, clattering to the floor. 20% casualty rate is considered acceptable. "Well, they knew the risks when they signed up," Tom said reasonably. "Australia's got some interesting creatures, spiders the size of dinner plates, snakes that can kill you in minutes, crocodiles that can bite through steel, jellyfish so toxic that touching one means certain death." The Altarian doctor frantically pulled up Earth's biological database. What he found made his sensory stalks curl in defensive positions. Every category was marked with the highest danger classifications in the galactic system. Venomous arthropods, apex predators, toxic plant life, parasitic organisms, bacterial infections that could dissolve living tissue. "Your entire ecosystem is designed to eliminate life," he whispered in amazement. "Not eliminate," Mitchell corrected cheerfully. "Just test it really thoroughly. The stuff that survives gets stronger." Vexthari scrolled through more data, his horror growing with each entry. Temperature ranges from -40 to +50 degrees Celsius. Seasonal variations that would flash freeze most species or boil their bodily fluids. Natural disasters occurring with regular frequency across all continents. "Don't forget the solar radiation," Sarah added helpfully. "Our star puts out some pretty intense stuff. We get gorgeous light shows when the solar flares hit the atmosphere." "Solar flares?" Vexthari's voice had climbed to frequencies that only his own species could properly hear. "Oh sure, happens all the time. Sometimes the radiation gets high enough that we have to wear extra protection for outdoor work, but it's nothing too serious. The aurora displays are beautiful though, sheets of green and blue light dancing across the sky for hours. Tom nodded agreement. Best viewing is from the polar regions, though you have to watch out for the cold. Temperatures there can drop low enough to freeze exposed skin in minutes. And you consider this normal? Nurse Calandra asked faintly. The three humans exchanged those silent looks again. Captain Mitchell spoke first. I guess we never really thought about it. Earth is just home, you know? Every world has its challenges. Vexthari pulled up comparative data from other inhabited planets. The worlds that most galactic species called home had stable weather patterns, minimal seismic activity, and carefully controlled ecosystems. Earth's environmental readings looked like a catalogue of planetary disasters. According to this data, he said slowly, your homeworld meets the criteria for a restricted hazard zone. Most species would classify it as uninhabitable. Uninhabitable? Sarah sounded genuinely surprised. But it's got such beautiful oceans and forests. The mountains are incredible, and the deserts have their own special beauty. Deserts where temperatures exceed safe levels for most known life forms, Vexthari noted. Well, you dress appropriately and bring plenty of water, Tom said practically. Basic survival skills. The doctor continued reading, finding more impossible facts. Your species regularly engages in recreational activities in environments that would be classified as extreme survival situations. Mountain climbing in sub-zero temperatures, deep-sea exploration under crushing pressure, endurance competitions across hostile terrain. Mitchell's face lit up with enthusiasm. Oh, you mean sports. I love rock climbing. There's nothing like hanging from a cliff face 1,000 meters above the ground, feeling every muscle work to keep you alive. Really gets the blood pumping. You climb cliffs for entertainment. Calandra's voice was barely a whisper. Best way to relax after a tough mission, Mitchell said sincerely. Though Sarah's more into deep-sea diving. She's been down to some incredible depths. The pressure at those depths would crush most beings instantly, Vexthari observed. That's what the equipment is for, Sarah explained patiently. Though even with protection, you have to be careful. The ocean doesn't forgive mistakes. Dr. Vexthari sat back in his chair, his entire worldview shifting like tectonic plates. These beings had evolved on a planet that actively tried to kill them every single day. Their concept of danger, pain, and survival had been forged in conditions that most civilized species use to describe the deepest layers of punishment worlds. No wonder they treated massive trauma as minor inconvenience. By their standards, it probably was. 3 days had passed since Captain Mitchell's arrival, and Dr. Vexthari found himself documenting medical phenomena that challenged everything he thought he knew about biology. The human's scratch was healing at a rate that defied scientific explanation. Torn muscle fibers were reconnecting, broken ribs were mending, and damaged organs were returning to full function without any surgical intervention. The cellular regeneration is beyond anything in our medical literature, Vexthari explained to his colleague Dr. N.Y.M. Tara through the communication link. Their immune system doesn't just fight infection, it actively rebuilds damaged tissue using some kind of biological framework I've never encountered. Meanwhile, Captain Mitchell had grown restless lying in the medical bay. Despite Vexthari's protests, the human had begun helping around the station. He assisted Nurse Calandra with routine tasks, organized supply inventories, and even helped repair a malfunctioning air filtration unit using tools from his ship. Back on Earth, everyone learns basic repair skills, Mitchell explained while rewiring a control panel with his chest wound still clearly visible. When your world keeps trying to break everything you build, you get good at fixing things quickly. Should you not be resting? Calandra asked nervously, watching him work with exposed internal organs. Rest is for when you're tired, Mitchell replied cheerfully. Besides, staying active helps the healing process. Blood flow keeps everything working properly. That afternoon, an emergency arrived that gave Vexthari new insight into human resilience. A Zeronian trader had suffered what his species considered severe burns. A plasma leak had damaged 12% of his surface area. The alien writhed in agony despite maximum pain medication, his crystalline skin blackened and cracked. Captain Mitchell approached the treatment table and examined the patient with professional interest. Plasma burns are tricky, he said to Calandra. You want to cool the affected area gradually, not all at once. Shock to the system can make things worse. You have medical training? Vexthari asked, surprised by the human's knowledge. Not formal training, but you pick up things when accidents happen regularly. I've treated worse burns than this on my own crew. Worse? The Zeronian patient's translator conveyed his disbelief through pained gasps. Mitchell nodded sympathetically. I know it hurts, but your species has much more sensitive nerve clusters than humans do. What feels unbearable to you would be uncomfortable for us. Different evolutionary paths, you know? To demonstrate his point, Mitchell rolled up his sleeve, revealing a network of scars across his forearm. See this one? Plasma torch accident during ship repairs. That one there is from a chemical spill. This big one happened when I grabbed a piece of superheated metal without thinking. Vexthari scanned Mitchell's arm with his medical sensors and nearly dropped the device. The scar tissue showed evidence of injuries that should have required immediate amputation for most species. The human had not only survived them but continued using the limb normally. How do you function with this level of accumulated damage? The doctor asked in wonder. Function? These barely slow me down, Mitchell said, flexing his scarred arm to show full range of motion. The body adapts. Scar tissue is actually stronger than regular skin in some ways. Tom Harrison limped into the medical bay, carrying a toolkit and faving his left leg noticeably. Captain, I finished those engine diagnostics you wanted. Everything's running smooth now. Excellent work, Tom. How's that ankle holding up? Getting better. Should be back to normal by tomorrow. Vexthari had been monitoring Tom's condition since his arrival. The engineer was walking on 3 fractured bones, torn ligaments, and severely damaged muscle tissue. Any reasonable medical protocol would have him in a full immobilization cast for weeks. Mr. Harrison, you need immediate surgical intervention, Vexthari stated firmly. Your injuries are far too severe for natural healing. Tom looked confused. Severe? It's just a twisted ankle, document. I've had much worse. Much worse. Kilandra's voice had become a permanent squeak when talking to humans. Sure. Last year I broke my leg in 4 places during a reactor accident. Kept working for 3 days before I could get to proper medical facilities. This is nothing compared to that. Sarah Williams entered the medical bay carrying a steaming cup of something that smelled like it could dissolve metal. Coffee, anyone? I finally got the food synthesizer to make something that tastes almost like home. She offered the cup to Vexthari, who politely declined after his sensors detected chemical compounds that would be toxic to most known species. Sarah shrugged and took a sip of what was essentially liquid poison, sighing with satisfaction. How do you consume that? The doctor asked in fascination. Caffeine tolerance builds up over time, Sarah explained. Most humans start drinking coffee as teenagers. By the time we're adults, we can handle pretty strong concentrations. Vexthari was beginning to understand that humans didn't just survive in extreme conditions, they actively sought them out. Their entire culture seemed built around testing limits, pushing boundaries, and treating potentially fatal situations as learning experiences. Over the following days, he watched Mitchell return to full activity despite injuries that would have killed most beings. Tom's twisted ankle healed in record time without any medical intervention. Sarah continued drinking her toxic coffee while discussing plans for their next mission to explore an uncharted system known for its dangerous radiation levels. Your species, Vexthari said to Mitchell on the 4th day, approaches survival from a completely different perspective than any other intelligent life we've encountered. Mitchell considered this thoughtfully. I suppose when death is always a possibility, you learn not to let it stop you from living. Earth taught us that the universe doesn't care about our comfort, so we learn to be comfortable with discomfort. It was the most profound medical philosophy Vexthari had ever heard. 1 week after Captain Mitchell's arrival at Medical Station Epsilon 7, Dr. Vexthari conducted his final examination of the human patient. His medical scanner showed results that would become legendary in galactic medical circles for generations to come. Complete tissue regeneration achieved, he documented in his official report. No surgical scarring detected. Full organ function restored to optimal levels. Patient has maintained normal activity throughout recovery period and shows no signs of lasting trauma. Captain Mitchell stood before the medical mirror, examining the thin pink line that was all that remained of his catastrophic injury. In any other species, such wounds would have left permanent damage, required extensive reconstruction surgery, and months of careful rehabilitation. The human was pulling on his uniform shirt as if nothing had happened. Thanks for everything, Doc, Mitchell said warmly. Your medical bay is really impressive. The scanner technology here is years ahead of what we have on Earth. Your species is rather remarkable as well, Vexthari admitted, his crystalline structure shifting with what humans might recognize as embarrassment. I must confess, I initially believed you would not survive the first night. Sarah Williams approached with departure clearances on her datapad. Captain, we've got authorization from Station Command. The survey mission is back on schedule, and Headquarters expects our report within 2 weeks. Already? Nurse Kilandra protested from across the medical bay. Surely you need more time to fully recover. The entire human crew burst into laughter, a sound that Vexthari had come to associate with their species' casual attitude toward danger. Tom Harrison, whose twisted ankle had healed completely in just 3 days, shook his head with amusement. Kilandra, if we waited until we were completely healed between missions, would never leave Earth's solar system, he said gently. This is normal operating procedure for human crews. Normal? She squeaked. Sure, Sarah added. Standard medical clearance requires that we can perform essential duties. As long as we're functional, we're cleared for active service. Vexthari made notes on his datapad as he listened. The human definition of functional bore no resemblance to any other species' medical standards. They considered themselves ready for dangerous space exploration with injuries that would hospitalize most beings for months. As the crew prepared to depart, an emergency signal pierced through the station's communication system. Dr. Nym Tara's voice came through with urgent priority. Medical emergency in Bay 7. Zenthari mining crew caught in asteroid collision. Multiple casualties with severe trauma. Previous assessment indicates several cases are beyond treatment protocols. Vexthari felt his old familiar response, the sinking certainty that some patients were simply too damaged to save. But then he looked at Captain Mitchell, who was walking around normally despite having arrived with mortal wounds just 1 week earlier. Dr. Vexthari, Mitchell said quietly, mind if I offer some advice? Please. On Earth, we have a saying, it's not over until it's over. We've learned that giving up too early means missing opportunities for recovery that might seem impossible at first. The human captain's brown eyes held steady contact with Vexthari's 4 visual senses. Your medical technology is incredible, and your knowledge far exceeds anything we have on Earth. But maybe you've been too conservative in your treatment approaches because you've never seen what's actually possible. Sarah nodded agreement. We humans aren't special because we're tough. We're tough because our world taught us that the alternative to fighting through pain is giving up entirely. Maybe other species just never had reason to test their real limits. Tom added his own perspective. Every creature has survival instincts. Perhaps they just need someone to believe those instincts are worth supporting, even when the situation looks hopeless. Vexthari considered their words as the emergency alarm continued to sound. In 40 years of medical practice, he had saved thousands of lives by following established protocols. But he had also lost patience by accepting limitations that might not have been as absolute as he believed. Nurse Kilandra, he said with newfound determination, prepare the emergency surgical bay for multiple trauma cases. We're going to try some new approaches. New approaches? She asked nervously. If humans can survive what they call minor scratches, perhaps we need to reconsider our definitions of survivable trauma. We're going to treat these patients as if their recovery is possible, regardless of how severe their injuries appear. The human crew exchanged those silent communications that Vexthari had learned to recognize as approval. Captain Mitchell extended his hand in the human gesture of respect. Good luck, document trust me, you'll be surprised what beings can survive when they have proper support and someone who believes in their chances. As the Phoenix departed for their next survey mission, Vexthari watched their engines flare to life through the observation port. The humans were heading toward another uncharted system filled with unknown dangers, treating the risks as simply another day's work. He turned back to his medical station and began updating the Galactic Medical Database with his complete findings. His report would revolutionize emergency medicine across dozens of worlds. Human physiological resilience exceeds all established parameters, he entered into the official record. What this species classifies as minor injuries would prove fatal to most council races. Recommend complete revision of emergency medical protocols. Primary lesson: never underestimate patient survival potential when proper support is provided. In the emergency bay, injured Zenthari miners were arriving. But for the first time in his career, Dr. Vexthari approached seemingly hopeless cases with genuine optimism. After all, if humans could call massive trauma just a scratch, perhaps it was time to discover what other species might accomplish with the right encouragement. The universe suddenly seemed full of possibilities he had never considered before.